Good evening and welcome again to another live stream about stuff going on in Ireland, about politics and all the rest of it. I'm Garrod. You know yourself. Like and subscribe and share and all of that. But thanks for joining me. I appreciate the company at this time of night. And if you're watching tomorrow, thanks for tuning in as well. So, and if you're on X or whether on YouTube or whatever, I just want to talk about a few bits tonight. Is really interesting. The Eurovision rigging, right? I'll be honest with you. I titled the stream as that, but I don't know if I'm all that interested. I want to more talk about some other stuff that I was speaking about last night, which was this whole Zionist influence on the right wing in Ireland. I want to kind of continue on from that. Hello, everybody in the chat. I hope my sound is coming through okay, but yeah, I kind of more want to talk about that, continue on a little bit, because there's loads to say about that. And the Eurovision thing is a little bit, I don't know, maybe let me know if who's more interested in like a continuation of that, talking about some of the drama on X, the fallout, people are talking about different aspects of that, debating it, or the Eurovision thing. I don't know, maybe I can do the Eurovision thing quickly. Start with that. The TLDR is that I'll just quickly do the Israel thing, or sorry, the Eurovision thing. The trouble is as well, people say, "Oh, you're just obsessed with Israel and Zionism or Jews or whatever it is," and I kind of shoot myself in the foot by coming on. I want to talk about all of that, like the nitty gritty of that on Twitter. People are giving out about it. The accusation is that you're obsessed, you're this or that, some negative connotation. And I want to go, no, I'm not. But then, of course, the stream is talking about that itself. And then the side point that I attach onto it is a sort of a not 100% provable at all, if we're being totally honest, thesis that Israel rigged the Eurovision. Now, this is widely believed, but like it's not just some corner of the internet thing. It's very widely suspected, we'll say, just across Europe, that that Israel rigged the Eurovision. So points, how it works and all that, I'm not an expert on that. I don't watch the Eurovision for sure. But the idea for the last few years, or for the last few decades, but certainly since October 7th and all of this, and the subsequent genocide and all that in Gaza, in response to it, but allegedly, there's been a lot of consternation in Europe, kind of liberal human rights Europe. The population don't like genocides, I suppose. And someone says EU is totally pro-Israel. Yeah, Ursula von der Leyen and people like that are, but the people, especially the culture makers, the taste makers, are in a big way anti-Zionist, pro-Palestinian. And it might vary across the EU, but certainly in places like Ireland, Norway, Spain, right? I mean, the most anti-Zionist of those countries is probably Ireland, and that's saying something. And I'm from here, so I know it fairly well, obviously, right? And the idea that Israel would get a large amount of a public vote from Ireland is sort of on its face absurd. Or you would say so. You would have said so last week, or perhaps. But effectively what happened is Israel came second. They got a scant enough vote from the jury, like however that works, the jury who vote within the Eurovision, the panel of experts or whatever they are. But then it's weighted against the public vote. The public call in and vote, like with X Factor or something like that. And what happened effectively is Israel got a paltry enough vote from the jury, okay? And then it went to the public vote, and they got such an inordinately high public vote that it rocketed them up to second place. They almost won. And of course, all eyes are on Israel because of the protest. You will have all these stories of from member states, as they call them, countries, will have their contestants sometimes back out. We had Bambi Thug, right, in Ireland, who was herself under a bit of heat from both sides because she wanted to participate. Some people wanted her to do it last year, I think it was. And then the left-wing milieu she was in were saying, no, you should boycott it. And she was crying about it all or whatever. So basically, the Eurovision is shot through with controversy about Israel and Zionism, Israel's participation. A lot of people demand that they should be kicked out of the Eurovision, much like Russia or the like, much like North Korea is ejected from polite global society or whatever, that like Israel should be a pariah on the world stage. They should not be participating in the Eurovision. Just as an aside, I would wonder like why they participate in the Eurovision just full stop, just on geographic terms alone. They're a sort of a Levantine, Middle Eastern sort of country. And I believe they've been in it since like the 70s or 80s, so it's not a recent thing. I just find it kind of strange. They are not fundamentally European either. Same way as I would just, that's not like an anti-Zionist point. It's just like, same way I wouldn't consider Lebanon or Syria European. You know what I mean? It's beyond Turkey. It's beyond the Bosphorus and the rest, It was the Roman Empire how many years ago? 2,000 years ago. But that doesn't really count. So anyway, that's the whole story. So basically, with the Eurovision of the last few years and going into it this year, it's like Israel is on everyone's brain. You even have a phenomenon whereby people in the crowd boo the Israeli contestants, and the television viewers don't hear it because it's muted. So it's just this whole shit show because Israel's participation or the reaction to them, whichever side you're on, it creates this whole sort of, it clouds the whole event. It's meant to be this camp, silly song contest with ridiculous songs. And yet the whole thing is pervaded by this big black cloud of geopolitical tension. And it's sort of the rubbing up of against each other of the institution itself of the Eurovision, and the very liberal as well, like liberal right on, they end up being anti-Palestinian or sorry, anti-Zionist. So it's like, it's how would I put it? It's like their own audience, their own constituency, really, not just Europeans in general, but like people who are close to that stuff. It's kind of a gay thing. It's kind of, urban and cosmopolitan and all that. So they're going to have a lot of that anti-Zionist crowd, and yet the institution itself clearly defends Israel's right to participate. They're not treating Israel like Russia. It's almost like the competition itself, the board or however it's organized, is more on van der Leyen's side, or however you pronounce your one's name. The is on that side, is more top down. Anyway, you have all that, and then this happens. Israel basically gets a low jury vote. People expect them to get a low vote from the population across Europe in general because they're kind of not all that popular as a country. The song isn't recognized as being particularly a hotshot song. Beforehand, you'll know from streaming views and numbers and all of that which songs are favorited basically and which aren't. And this one wasn't, I believe, particularly favorited. And so the fact that it shot up in the public vote, which the other thing is it's open to exploitation, and there's little bits of evidence, it's all a bit circumstantial, but Israelis on X saying, I voted 20 times, I have a credit card in 3 different countries, so that allowed me to vote 20 times in 3, so 60 times. And I can read an article about like the official Israeli X accounts and various kind of Hasbara accounts promoting the idea of mass voting, which is obviously unsportsmanlike. It's not traditional. Ireland doesn't really do that. Like, you don't have a Rialtas na hÉireann asking people to go out and mega vote just by themselves. That's not really the done thing necessarily. So there is reason to believe it was rigged, right? There's a world where maybe it wasn't, but I think it's a very reasonable suspicion anyway that it was effectively rigged in that sense. Which I just think is, I could go through some of the stuff. Did I share my screen? I don't know. I hope I'm not boring you with the Eurovision stuff. Should I be on to the other? I'll do it anyway. Let's just do it. I shouldn't caveat myself. I shouldn't doubt myself, should I? But so yeah, most streamed Eurovision 25 songs in May, and you have like whatever 10 different countries there, and Israel isn't even one of them. There's loads of tweets about how if you go to YouTube, it's got very low numbers. There's no other reason basically. Like the only thing that would indicate that there was popularity is the vote itself, right? Um, but any of the other metrics where you just, okay, what else would associate with that? If we want to figure out whether that was rigged or not, let's look at some other popular metrics. Viewage, is that a word? On YouTube or anywhere else. It didn't have it anywhere else, so it doesn't quite make sense. It wasn't favorited. So let's get into some of the stuff itself. I mean, there might be more. It doesn't really matter. So there's this account, Carl Radl on Substack. Carl Radl, Carl KARL. It's a good Substack, interesting Substack, let's say, or X account. I'll just link that in the chat. Actually, I won't read it all out because it's just suffice it to say, isn't it? You get the idea. I mean, people in the chat here saying 100% of his fixture shows nearly everything. The other thing is that I don't know if they got 12 points from Ireland, but they got a good showing from Ireland, and that just kind of doesn't make sense, right? It's been polled. All you need to do is live in Ireland. It's a strongly anti-Zionist, pro-Palestinian country, and that would, unless it was the best song there ever was, and it hypnotized people into changing their general sentiment on Israel, then it wouldn't make sense that we would give them high numbers in this popular vote. It just doesn't make sense. It kind of just makes more sense on its face that it was rigged, which is on paper the conspiracy theory, but it's actually more of an Occam's razor thing. That almost makes more sense from a neutral perspective. So this article just goes through some of the details, like this person on X saying, I voted 60 times for Israel, 20 from international, 20 from UK. And we know these people are very good at like letter writing campaigns and mass organized sort of like tribing up together and being, like that person who writes 40 letters to the council and presses and presses and presses, like Zionists, we'll say, are known for being sort of having a culture of everybody sort of being like that, everybody being plugged into the game. It's almost like I'm known as a nationalist, a political activist. I'm activated and engaged in the well-being of Ireland and our people and all this stuff. It's almost like all Zionists are sort of like that as default. Whereas here, I'm like that, but a lot of other people mind their own business, go about their lives and don't involve themselves. Israelis and Zionists, of course, are very, very involved, and they have all these networking strategies to achieve their sort of goals and ends. So it would kind of follow. Someone else says, I voted 100 times. I used 5 credit cards. It just goes through loads of different bits on that. I just feel like it would be kind of boring for me to go through. He just describes it as obviously like a way to manufacture consent. And speaking of which, like, effectively you can look it up, but you can get into the nitty gritty if you want to prove. I think in the fullness of time you could probably do mathematical analysis of some of this stuff and almost prove it with certainty whether it was rigged or not, much like people do with elections. But say we agree that there's a strong chance it was rigged. The narrative that came out straight away from Zionists and their proxies was that, many of which were Irish as well, because it especially centers on Ireland, because Ireland is so known as being the anti-Zionist country. The idea that it got a strong showing from the public vote was a huge propaganda boon, obviously. And the idea being that, say you're talking about immigration and you go, well, you'll never see that on the Late Late Show, and nobody talks about it at work because HR and because the media is corrupt, and there's a top-down view that everybody loves immigration. But if you actually poll the public, or you take a pulse of the public, you will find out quickly enough that, in fact, there's a silent majority out there who actually are against immigration. Similarly, you have a silent majority out there who are cowed by the top-down anti-Zionist thing. They don't want to say it because it's not cool, it's not acceptable in Ireland to be pro-Israel. But when they have the opportunity to privately cast their vote, they actually are ambivalent or have warm feelings towards Israel. And that just goes to show that anti-Zionism in Ireland is effectively fake, and it's top down because of a Eurovision song vote, which probably was in some sense rigged. But that narrative was trotted out straight away. And if you just take all that as fact, I think that's the most likely scenario there. The whole thing was probably a bit of a PR operation, and they probably did rig it by encouraging mass voting and all of this within foreign countries and the rest of it. It's not a good look. It's like the whole, like, can we not just have a song contest? Can we not just have a silly song contest where, the Swede with the blonde hair and the silly laugh and all of this comes on, and they speak in their funny accents to each other, and it's a bit of crack and whatever. And the other thing too is, like, going back to the Israeli participation in it full stop, it's that if it was just Europe, like modern post-World War II Europe, there's no reason why there'd be a mass cheating campaign from Ireland or from Sweden or whatever. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit. Some people will ring up a few times or vote a few times, but not a mass organized, state-sponsored sort of campaign. And that's not done because it's not that important. We don't have to get some international propaganda coup for a genocide or whatever. So it's not all that serious. And, maybe Ireland gives Britain no points because of the historical thing, a little bit of a nudge to Britain. Maybe they do the same back. Maybe you have something between Czechia and Slovakia, or I don't know, something like that. But it's not in big seriousness. Like, it's not a big deal. Overall, it's pretty neutral. If we like Spain's song, we'll vote for Spain's song, and we might vote for the neighbor a little bit, but not too much. There's actually a spirit of fairness to some extent, and it's just some silly songs, and that's it. But even our silly song contest has to be co-opted by this ultimately foreign country, non-European sort of country, for, like, cynically, it's just so unsportsmanlike. It's like someone who wants to cheat in a game of cards, and they're like, you explain to them that cheating is wrong and it's not in the spirit of the game. It ruins the game. We're here to have fun. We've only got 50 euro down on the game. It's not the end of the world. We're ultimately here not to make loads of money or anything, just to have a bit of fun and get together. And this person just won't stop cheating. And you're just like, I could cheat too, but I'm not. We're here. The game matters, like, and it's a nice thing. It's got an inherent value. I almost can't explain why. I just get why. It's in the spirit of. It's in just neighborly fun. The song contest shouldn't be too attached to this stuff. But this person just doesn't get it. They're like, yeah, but if I cheat, I can win. It's like, okay, so you just don't grasp the idea. Even in the sense that, like, assuming they did somewhat rig it, it's like, it's not exactly a propaganda win, because of course people are going to suspect that, given that it's highly likely. And when you come out with this fake narrative immediately the next day and push the idea that, look, this goes to show that Europe loves Israel or something, it's just going to make people, even from a Zionist perspective, even if I was a Zionist, I would be saying it's kind of not a good look to go down that road, to be sort of, because it's already kind of like Israel being in the Eurovision is a bit of an interloper sort of situation anyway. Don't, like, do that, just, like, come last if you come last. If Europe's got a sentiment against you, even if that does affect their vote, a bias against you, just take it on the chin. Don't participate, whatever. But this, it's just, in a way, it's just kind of confirming people's bad feelings towards that country, I would say. There were a few details that this Carl Radl guy got into that I should really mention, but no. Yeah, it's too much. Anyway, I might get into the other stuff. So yeah, someone here says, stop focusing on Israel. Yeah, well, that's kind of that's a good cue for me, actually, because I am going to focus on it. And I kind of want to talk about, like, the justification of why I am focusing on it, and why focusing on it is not the big deal that people are making it out to be. So who's ready to get into it? The e-drama, the Twitter drama. Share this around as well if you want. I mean, if I'm here, I might as well have more people watching it, I suppose. Fred Wall says, focus on Albania. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's funny. It's such a funny situation. To me, it's so obvious and it's so absurd, this question of Israel. So I'll just get into it. So for those of you who were watching last night, I went on a big long thing about it. I felt like I only skimmed the surface. I felt like I didn't treat it properly, as I always do, because I make it up as I go along. So that's the nature of this. So I always finish it and I go, gosh, if I went live and just repeated the same thing again, just like doing like if you do a play or something, the second night you'll be better than the first night. I could really do that again and again and like refine it. But anyway, I gave my spiel as it was for what it was on this thing, and I feel like it was pretty reasonable. And if I could just maybe, for those who aren't aware, reverse back, not to rehash the whole thing, but I have this idea that, as many others do, that there's a tendency for Zionists to sort of use right-wing populist nationalist political movements in the West as a political vehicle for their own ends, and sort of they don't really want it to go anywhere. They have an inherent hostility towards it, really, and so they use it, they pump it and dump it for their own ends, and that's one of many reasons why these things never go anywhere, even when people do get elected to government. That it's a sort of hegemonic sort of Atlanticist top-down regime thing, where that force is very powerful within it, and they have a big and inordinate sway, not just on the society, but specifically so on the right-wing populist movements. So when people say things like Jews run the West and this, that, and the other, whether you agree or disagree with that, there's for and against arguments on that, right? But or Zionists or whatever you want to call it, there are these theories and arguments that happen online. Mine is not actually that. That would be a different argument. I could make that argument. I could counter argue that on a different night. That's a broader question, right? This whole JQ thing or Zionist influence or whatever. What I'm talking about specifically is not that. I'm not defending that argument, because I'm not, for the purposes of this, not making that argument. That's not what I'm doing. I'm making the argument about that same influence specifically in right-wing nationalist populist movements in the West. Because in that case, so whether you believe or not, Jews or Zionists or whatever have this big influence in the West overall, all this Hollywood and whatever it is, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about within a much smaller selection pool of right-wing nationalist populist movements in Western countries, which is a much more concentrated catchment area, right? And my argument is that within that, whether there's big influence in society or not, there is off-the-wall influence within these right-wing nationalist populist movements. And I believe that influence is it looks like a helping hand, but it's ultimately cynical and counterproductive. And not good for these it's a sort of corrupt motive. It's an outside interloper motive, and it's not good. I think nationalist movement should just be nationalist, especially given the fact that the whole brand of nationalism is to be plainly critical of outside groups and sort of focused on your own nation. So for it to be sort of shot through and almost more offended and obsessed and defensive about Jewish and Zionist interests as it is the own ostensible national interest, is just doesn't make sense, you know. And I would say the same thing in the interest of fairness. I would say the same thing if it were Burmese Buddhist nationalists who have an issue with the Rohingya Muslims and blah blah, some issue there, and those people have a big influence in the West, and then an especially concentrated influence in Western right-wing nationalist populist movements. And that was the going theory. And then in Ireland, sure enough, bum, 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 everywhere you go, you see them. And then you pop up and you say, I don't know about all this Burmese Buddhist sort of chauvinist influence, sort of like both Burmese people themselves and then people who identify as friends of Burma and go on a lot about Burma, defending it and giving the Burmese point of view. Well, this is the Rohingya attacked them first and all this kind of stuff. I think it would be fair to go, what's the story with all that? Like, it's kind of weird, Can we interrogate that? Can we focus on that? And that would be weird, and it is weird with the actual scenario. And I'm just making that point. But so basically, I noticed that. I've noticed that for a long time. Many others have, and I've seen it kind of growing in Ireland subtly. It's been there a long time, but it's been sort of revving back up again lately, and sort of around the Palestinian issue. Turning. I know I'm rehearsing this again, but effectively, my theory would be that it's sort of using the right wing. The aim, basically, is to breathe oxygen into the right wing nationalist movement, cover their immigration stuff, give it some legs, help it along. But of course, while you do that, you sort of build relationships and sort of foster the anti-Palestinian or sort of subtly pro-Zionist view, and then establish a beachhead for a signal jamming faction within Ireland to sort of disturb the unanimity of pro-Palestinian sentiment within Ireland, right? Because but for that, there is no other fertile ground for it. And so it just totally makes sense. The figureheads are there. My point would be that it's not a swivel-eyed conspiracy theory. It's not pointing the fingers at everyone saying you're a shill and you're not and you might be. It's not doing that. It's just to say that this is a very, to say the least, very reasonable theory, surely. I mean, unless I've gone mad, and anyone who, like, I think that's gaslighting, and I will get into that. But that's my theory, is that that's a phenomenon that's at play. Not the be-all and end-all, not the only thing, but just it is a legitimate concern and phenomenon that's at play. And I'm happy for someone to disagree and say, I don't think it is. And to address my arguments and say, here's why I don't think that's the case at all. And through their own actions, through their own sentiment and their willingness to discuss it and stuff like that, demonstrate that maybe that's not the case. And I go, yeah, maybe I'm just thinking about that too much. Maybe I should just focus on immigration 24/7 and never look at that whatsoever, because that's silly, right? I'm happy to have that discussion. The problem is we don't really get that. You get exactly the reaction that you would expect if my theory were true. You get excoriation, you get ending of conversations, you get blackening, in the sense of like when someone, so to speak, goes kind of black with you or goes kind of dark on you, that kind of thing. Someone suddenly just won't talk to you or is closing the door. You're going, oh, I thought we were just talking, what's wrong? Like, why can't we talk about this? We talk about lots of stuff. And that's the reaction that's happening. So anyway, so I'm giving maybe a bit too much background. That's my thought in the last few months. I've been kind of observing it. And again, in my defense, I talk about immigration, I talk about this and that and the other. And I will have this thing in the back of my mind that I'm, like many other things, that I'm sort of keeping in mind, aware of. And my attitude, for any of you who are familiar with me particularly, I think I'm probably known, if I may say so, for being fairly diplomatic. People fall out with each other about all sorts of stuff, little things. I don't like him, I don't trust him. I always say, listen, we're not mind readers. We don't know. It's unhealthy. Even if I agree with you, that person is a bit dodgy, because I don't know. For me to sort of stir the pot and create this drama, fallings out and attacks and all this stuff, it's just counterproductive, because the third parties who watch it, the people who want to get into this politics and the rest of it, they see all this bickering and drama, and it's not good. It's not healthy. And so the ends don't justify the means. So I stay away from it. It's also just unenjoyable. That's my attitude. I think I'm probably one of the best known people. Maybe I'm overdoing myself here, but I think I'm fairly well known for being like that. I sort of keep on decent terms with everyone. People I don't agree with on everything, people I do agree with, and just sort of try to say, well, let's focus on what we do agree on rather than what we don't agree on. And that's for the better. And the main central thing would be immigration, the regime itself, probably like teaching children how to be transgender. I think we can all agree on stuff like that. Let's focus for the most part where we can on that and let the other stuff slide. Because when we meet each other in real life and we have a drink and we hang out, we'll realize these differences aren't that much of a big deal, and we build trust. and all of that's good. So that's my sentiment. I am not a pot stirrer, right? So I'm thinking about this in the back of my mind, keeping it. I'm not sort of having a fleeting thought and going on a wild Twitter thing. And then just like last week, I've just seen a little bit too much of it. And I just go, do you know what? I'm not going out here. Stop me if I'm losing here. Maybe I'm too self-doubting here. I'm just going to keep going. So I decide that I've just seen a bit too much, and too much of this sort of like down with the Palestinians, you know, type of stuff. And I just feel like that is low key pretending to be neutral, but is effectively, conveniently, a bit beneficial to the Zionist side. And it's all a bit too 2 + 2 = 4, you know. And what I'm seeing is that the usual suspects are going along with it, and the not so usual suspects are sort of going along with it. And I'm not pointing fingers, and I don't think everyone's got a bad motivation. And I even think being annoyed at the Palestinian flag being so pervasive with some of the crazy lefties, legitimate, understandable. I get all that, but I'm concerned about the way it's going a bit too strong, right? Etc. So I decide I'm not going to go out and point fingers and say you're bad and you shouldn't say this and you should say what I want you to say. I'm not into that. It's neurotic. It's unhealthy. So I say, well, if some people are going to kick the Palestinians, and that's the vibe, that's what everyone's doing now, and Ezra Levant's there with his microphone, and Michael Murphy from Telegraph, who was in Israel doing pro-Israel documentaries, is arriving in Ireland on behalf of the Telegraph, covering the immigration generously, but then also keeps raising the Palestine issue, even though it's sort of shoehorned in a bit. And all of this is happening at the same time. I'm like going, well, if that's all happening, then I can't stop people. I can't micromanage everyone. That's not my job. I wouldn't claim to be that influential or whatever. But I say, well, what I can do is I can say, free Palestine, Palestine flag, press post, right? I'm not attacking anyone. I'm just giving my point of view, because I do support Palestine, not intensely. I'm not all about it, but I do, right, in that situation, honestly. And so I go, that's my point of view. I mean, if everyone else is sharing their point of view, down with the Palestinians, and we have to be strenuously neutral, and Ireland shouldn't say anything about it, and all of this stuff, well, then I'm going to give my perspective. I'm not a lefty. I'm not the transgender from Trinity. I'm not Paul Murphy, but I actually think free Palestine. So I'm going to do like a reverse signal jam, and it also is just what I believe. So I'm just going to say that, and I get a torrent of some of these strange anons saying, you're a fucking Muslim licker, you know, are you a jihadi? Are you want Muslims to come in and cut our heads off and all this kind of stuff, right? It's like, and I'm going, just as I knew what it would bring, because I'm experienced with this stuff, but sure enough, it did. And it's kind of like, whoa. And it ends up snowballing. I don't know if I'm responsible for all the stuff that's gone on since. Maybe there was a little butterfly effect, perhaps. But it gets all of this backlash, not from the majority, but just the people who do backlash hard. And it's a lot of these strange anon accounts and the rest of it. And hitherto, they would have shared my stuff. I might have shared their stuff, immigration. Oh, you know, these immigrants are fighting each other, stabbing each other on the street in Dublin. They're gone wild. Oh, it's Muslims. Oh, it's Indians. Oh, Indians are buying up all the houses in Lucan or whatever. No problem. We're criticizing out groups. We're criticizing plainly these groups. We're right wing. We're nationalists. We're not politically correct and all that. All was grand. No bother. And then suddenly they're saying, you love Muslims. You want them to take over and chop, like insane stuff. You know, all I said was free Palestine. Can I not have that view? Is that all right? And unhinged and very personal. Like, oh, I thought you were good, but you're a scumbag. And it's like, wait, I am good. I mean, from your own point of view, surely you share my stuff. You agree with me. And then they say, we should stay out of it. You should shut up. We should have no view on it. We should be neutral, all this stuff, right? And it's just sort of like, why would you burn the bridge with me? Like, if you by your own claims agree with me on everything up until now, you thought I was cool, you thought everything was perfect, and if Israel Palestine is such a foreign, not related to Ireland, none of our business. We do not have a vested interest one way or the other, and it's actually quite unimportant. Well, if that were the case to you, truly, then you would say, well, look, this is one of these things I disagree with Garrod on. Some people like Manchester United, some people like this, some people like that. Some people believe climate change is real, some people don't. Some people like electric cars and they don't, others don't. Tax policy, some people think we should be socialist and out, or whatever. We should be like a sort of more on the socialist end. Others are hardcore libertarians and all that. And the usual thing would be, well, I mean, I think we all agree on the central issue. And if someone says they're a libertarian, I might politely disagree. I go, well, I would disagree with that, gentleman's disagreement. And they go, well, here's a counter argument, and no bother. But probably wouldn't even do that. We don't even bother to discuss it. You're that, I'm this, no problem. We agree on the main stuff. But they are the ones who come into my thing when I just say Free Palestine and are apoplectic. And that's the contradiction. It's like, what's that about, right? Or the same could be said whether you're just saying Free Palestine or whether you're saying, oh, I'm critical of Jewish influence or something like that. You're not naming names. You're not pointing fingers. You're just saying an overall theory. Same way someone would say an economic theory about libertarianism or free market or whatever. But it gets this apoplectic response, like, almost like violent sort of language, maybe that's an exaggeration, but bordering on like a really aggressive, nasty language, not a disagreement. Anyway, so let's get on to the most recent. That was my whole thing. I spoke about that. I got that response, spirals into this big thing, it turns into this big divisive, ugly issue. And I'm going, well, I just said Free Palestine. And I'm just saying, I think there's a lot of Jewish Zionist influence on the right. I think those are back upable. I'm not forcing it on anyone here. I'm just giving my point of view. You could just pass it by if you want to, but you're the one turning it into a death match here, that kind of thing. And that's the and see, the problem is that they will then accuse you of being the catalyst or the key catalyst of that situation, where it's not. It's like, no, I'm bringing up a point. I'm happy to debate things and disagree or whatever. Someone says, look at the chat. What should I be looking at? I'm not sure. Anyway, I don't really care. Like, as in, if there's some troll there, but I don't particularly care. I don't know if I have bots, or sorry, not bots. What are they called? Mods. Yeah. Anyway, so I'll try to keep an eye, but that's where we are on that. Then I do my stream and get a bit more sort of into it. Anyway, semi-unrelated. I get off stream last night and I see there's been more fallout on X, Twitter. And it's this. So it's one of these accounts, one of these, some people say slop accounts. That's what's the word? A pejorative, or you could use a superlative, that they post engaging content or whatever. But that means that you take the videos of the day that are posted online, you download the video, you reattach it, you use some catchy sort of bog basic rhetoric, you put it out for views and numbers and all the rest of it, right? Let's call it a slop account, right? Just as a neutral term. So one of these kind of accounts, who again I've seen been around the scene for the last couple of years, has kind of gotten to be a big account, anonymous, but posts all this stuff, immigration, blah blah blah, has posted this, and it sort of just demonstrates like my point, says anyone, this is just out of nowhere now, I don't know what brought him to this, says anyone who posts something derogatory on my feed about Jewish people is getting a block. This is quote here, right? I don't give a fuck who you are or how long we may have interacted. I don't care if you troll or insult me on this tweet. I won't be replying. Go fuck yourself. I mean, it's kind of like, need I say more? Someone says slop is the correct term. Well, ever the diplomat that I am, I'm just trying to be polite, right? I'm trying to address the arguments and avoid the pejoratives. But yeah, slop. So, that's posted. And of course, the first thing I do is jump in, because I see what I'm reacting to there is, one, I could say, well, you're proving my point, this kind of pervasive Jewish influence Zionist influence, whatever you want to call it, in the right wing, where we can talk about, and I said this, I tweeted this a few days ago, it's just like a kind of satire point or whatever, to say right-wing nationalist populists, certain ones, when you criticize Indians, Africans, gay people, transgenders, Muslims, Sikhs, you name it, you say anything, right? And they go, based. And then when you criticize Jews or Zionists, the same people will say, why are you obsessed with this? You're hateful. This is dangerous language. You're being divisive. You're paranoid. You're obsessed. Why are you all this kind of gaslighting? And it's just like they heap that onto you. And it's like, I'm just trying to be reasonable here. Like, explain it to me. Like, calm down. I mean, I started with Free Palestine. Some other people might say there's Jewish influence on the right, this, that, and the other. Whatever. Some people might be a bit more edgy and use edgy language and joking and whatever. But it's the same thing. It's just critical of this group, critical of its influence, or the country of Israel, or whatever happens to be. I just, all I'm asking for is some logic on why it's okay for Indians or Muslims or black people or Africans or whatever, and why the handbrake gets like abruptly pulled up on this. Like, I get it from an Antifa or a 19-year-old college girl who is studying humanities or something, right? And has watched a few too many movies or whatever, and believes in like lollipops and butterflies and rainbows. That's the worldview. I get that from them. They say, don't be anti-Semitic. You're saying Jews, you're saying Zionists or all Israelis or something like that. You're painting with broad brushstrokes. What about World War II? What about this? What about that? What about whatever? You know, something that's anti-Semitic. You can't say that. Something like that, right? I get it from them, because if I say it about anyone else, Indians, Sikhs, Burmese, Nepalese, whatever, Brazilians, they'll say the same thing. And I think most people agree that that's a doe-eyed, or like a silly sort of cult, basically, to believe that. That's a nonsense worldview, right? And we'll say what we want, like, you know, within reason we'll point out the truth. Roma gypsies, for example. People will say Roma gypsies are, you know, Roma gypsies, and they'll explain the details of that, what that entails, and what everyone knows with the, you know, and, you know, you could say, well, you're generalizing, because I know a Roma gypsy who is very upstanding and works, is paid a 6-figure salary and mows their lawn and all this stuff. And it's like, well, we all know, yeah, of course there are. And so if someone says something about Romas and it's critical, we understand that you don't have to caveat that, oh, I'm generalizing, I'm looking at trends, I'm observing reality for the most part. You don't have to caveat that. You can just criticize the group, and this Peter Paul guy won't be there to melt down on you about it, right? And same with pretty much any other group, specifically Muslims. While he was posting this, I'll find it in a sec, something about Palestinian. Oh, it was a picture of, I think, Muslims or Levantine looking people in kafiyas, whatever they're called, in Dublin, maybe at a protest. And it was like, kick these Muslims back to Gaza or something, you know. And that's the other contradiction, is that this is the most mad contradiction of all, right? The same people who have what is a 19-year-old, like Antifa adjacent college student girl, like meltdown if you like criticize Jewish people in basically any way, and we'll get to the fact that it is in any way, have a hysterical shutdown reaction on that. The same people will say things like, I think we should just put all these Muslims are latently, fundamentally jihadis. And I'm not, for YouTube mods or whatever, you know, that sounds a bit over the top. I'm quoting an idea from someone else. You know, they'll say that, the counter jihad idea, that they are, and it's so funny because it tracks so well with what would be considered anti-Semitic, over the top conspiracy theories, right? So, and it actually goes far beyond, because the idea is that, well, every Muslim is here to like cut your head off and put you under Sharia law and collect a jizya tax from you, and it's going to happen in 6 years' time. That's all we have left, and the rest of it. And they're being sponsored. They are a global ummah, so they are actually all like one hive mind, and they're all working together in a game theory sense against us. So you might be talking to a Muslim and they might seem nice, but in reality, they are like life and death in league with their own, and they see us as a people to conquer and subjugate, etc. Right? And ultimately, like slaughter is the theory, right? At its most dramatic. And that they are an ummah, and from the top level, from Saudi Arabia and Iran right down to the Muslim in Bradford or Minnesota or wherever, they are like up and down the hierarchy and across. They are in total cahoots with each other against us and for themselves. And every little thing you see that they do is part of that agenda. And they have control over certain things. They have control over the media. They have control over NGOs. They have control over this and that, and the governments themselves. And it's like, well, that is like full on. And whether you agree with it or not, I'm not saying like a lot of these theories about Muslims aren't true. I'll agree on every side of it, really. There's truth to all of it, or there's some truth to all of it. But they themselves are the biggest proponents of these like full on dialed up theories about Muslims with the most like unvarnished language. Like these people, you know yourself, you've seen it, right? And I bet I've seen it myself. This Peter Paul guy will do this rhetoric, and yet then you flip around and you go, okay, well, I'll do like 3% of that about Jews. Like same theory, they're sort of in cahoots with each other. Again, not everyone or any of that, but just there is a phenomenon where there's a sort of the global diaspora population. It works a bit together as a team. I think it's fairly well known. They're like some of the most tribal people on earth, right? And are very successful, have a lot of influence and work as a team and all that. That's just sort of common sense. And then if you say, well, what about if all that networking and influence and stuff were sort of at odds with our interests? I mean, that's a reasonable next step to take. And then you just explore that idea. Suddenly it's shut down. So anyway, it doesn't make sense, but we're here. And again, they want, the whole idea is that I would say, well, let's keep discussing it. And they're the ones who say, no, you're getting blocked. You're a scumbag. You're a jihadi sympathizer. You're destroying the movement. You're creating division. You're this, you're that. It's just like, I'm trying to be reasonable. Hey, you're the one freaking out. Like, I'm not actually freaking out. Like, I did a live stream. And the other thing they say, you're spending all your time talking about Jews and Zionists and this. And these are false claims because, of course, you look back over my streams, let's say, over the last year, you go back over my tweets, and most of it is about immigration and Carrick Macross and asylum centers, and they're putting this in schools and that in schools all the time, like 99%, right? And then for this week, there's a bit of a theme where I'm focusing on this. How many times have I tweeted about how many Indians are coming to Ireland over loads? That over the last 5 years, you have almost as many Indians who've come to Ireland as the population of Galway City, in just Indians alone. I make that point, right? Nobody came freaking out of me for pointing that out. But then suddenly you spend a couple of days, and by the way, I'm tweeting and doing other things too. But one of the things I'm focusing on is this Jewish Zionist issue. And then suddenly you fast forward like 1 week after you've mentioned it, and you've mentioned it a few times since, and suddenly you're obsessed with it, and you're spending all your time talking about it and all the rest of it. It's like, no, I just brought it up. I only brought it up basically yesterday, type of thing. So one of the questions, I don't take many notes, but one of the notes I said is that I said, what if for the person who thinks I'm terrible and you shouldn't talk about this for all these like made up reasons, like, and also it's not true. There is no Jewish Zionist thing or whatever. So on the face of it, it's false. Therefore, I'm blocking you. It's like, well, we haven't had that discussion yet. Like, you won't have it. But the same as I say with the pro-immigration people. I always said when I first got into anti-mass immigration politics, they would say, well, it's okay in theory to talk about immigration, but you're racist. You said this once, you said that once. And I would always say, well, what would the person who is stridently against mass immigration, but they're definitely not racist. You can't accuse them of being racist. They're not racist. You won't even infer it. They're totally legitimate to have their opinion, but they're stridently against mass immigration. They want to drastically cut it down, all that. What would that argument look like for you, the Antifa NGO, commissar, to be happy? Because you say that there is, in theory, a version that you would accept if it just weren't racist or something. But the reality is that there is no such thing, clearly, right? And it's the same with this. It's like, what would the idea that, well, there's a lot of Jewish Zionist influence and right-wing nationalist populist movements, and they've got all the motive in the world to be involved in Ireland, that there are all these circumstantial bits of evidence, like tons, right, that just make it seem totally obvious as a theory, and that they, I don't think Israel should do what they should be doing, and I think it's okay to be pro-Palestinian, and I think it's okay to be critical of Jews, just like it is anyone else. Like, what version of that argument would be acceptable to these people within the right wing, who are so prone to criticize every group on earth with glee? What version would be sensitive enough on Jewish people and Zionists and all that you would say, well, that's fair enough. You could talk about that, among other things. Oh, now you're not offending me. That's cool, because you're being reasonable enough or something. What's the version? Which version is it? Give us the rule set. And then the other thing would be like, I'd like to know what their argument is. Instead of just saying, don't post about it, shut up, you're being divisive, or something like that. Again, like what you would say with Antifa, this is kind of not an argument. My argument is my theory. I've demonstrated it, right? I could demonstrate it more. I think on paper, I could, with detailing, I could totally, it's a like open and shut type of thing. To make that case, to be critical or to have criticism. It'd be weird if you couldn't criticize the group or find reason to. That's my argument. Besides the excoriation and the blocking and the you're being divisive, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're obsessed, why are you saying this? Besides that, like, what's your argument? Yeah, like, your argument might be something like, well, I can show that actually there either is no inordinate Jewish Zionist influence, specifically in the right-wing nationalist populist scene in the West. There is none. You're imagining it. Here I can demonstrate it. Here I can take your arguments of all these figures and institutions that exist and precedents. Here I'll take them. I'm speaking to myself, like to the opponent. You, Garrod, I'll take your book of evidence here and I'll go through it and I'll say, this actually doesn't this is all incorrect. It's not true. And here's some other context that sort of makes it make sense that you're seeing something that's not there, and or they might say, well, no, it is there, but it's fundamentally a great thing. It's wonderful. Here are all the ways in which it's wonderful. Here's how successful it is. Look, it got Maloney elected. Isn't it better to have someone in than out? So I agree with you that she had huge influence from them, or Millet or something, but actually those people are wonderful. It's better to have them. Like, that's probably a semi sort of like holds water argument. I don't think so, but like, you could put it forward, like, make the argument, have the discussion. The other thing too is that these same people not only are critical of other groups in an unvarnished, plain way, Indians, Muslims, gay people, whatever it is, right? And then they totally hypocritical with this. The other value that they seem to espouse and love to espouse is free speech, that these liberals will block you and shut you down and will say that any discussion of a group or of immigration or whatever is tantamount to stirring up a genocide or whatever it is. You're on the brink of a pogrom, you're this, that, you're an evil barbarian or whatever. And the same people, like this Peter Paul guy or whoever else, would say, that's nonsense. These liberals are crazy. You can have a criticism. In fact, even if it's a bit controversial, I have my free speech. I have my right to talk about this stuff. And not only do I have that right, but I think more than a right, I think we should talk about it. I think we shouldn't be so sensitive and we should have these conversations, and it's valuable. So it's a total contradiction. It's like, okay, so suddenly the argument, it's not, you're not even willing to make the argument. You're openly saying, I will not discuss this. Any criticism whatsoever is evil, insane, bad, wasting time, or whatever it is. You're spending all your time on it, even though you started talking about it 5 days ago and only mentioned it a few times. Those aren't arguments. It's just the whole thing. And this is my fundamental argument There's all the details of the influence. But when it comes down to the butting of heads on this, my argument is this: the contradiction of it all. It makes no sense. Why? And then that takes us kind of full circle, which is like, why is this happening? Why does this happen? Go back to your Burmese Buddhist nationalist, anti-Rohingya Muslim, something like that. Like, it would be bizarre if this exact same scenario, if I said free the Rohingya or free the Burmese and the opposite or whatever, and it, it created such drama and such shutdown and such a liberal Antifa-like sort of response. And because we are on the right and we're nationalists and we're anti-PC and all this, we're so familiar with the symptoms. We're so familiar with what it looks like when this thing is happening. And when it comes to the left and to the regime, we know, we've diagnosed it for years. We know the symptoms, and we know when you're being given that treatment, it's not coming from a sort of a sincere place, really, is it? Or it doesn't look like it is. It's coming from a place of control, intellectual, mental control, to say that you can't talk about this thing. And not only that you can't talk about it, but that you will be under attack for bringing it up. Your character will be impugned. You will be accused of being, and while you're a Muslim lover, you're a jihadi sympathizer, what, like insane stuff like that. And again, the same stuff like you're wasting time, you're obsessed with things that are just patently not true, like not true at all. Anything but deal with the argument at hand. And that's the point. Anyway, so this guy tweets this. I tweet back at him just for fun. I don't even, it's not even a big concern of mine. I don't know, would I even defend it that hard? Like, it's a sort of thing I half believe, it's a generalization or whatever, but I said, Jews invented woke. I was just coming up with something off the top of my head, just plainly because I was like, well, why are you censoring? Like, I always want to snap back to something like that. You're saying I can't talk about it. Let me think of some general criticism, something like that. And of course the block happened. So I'm like, look, Grant, I don't want to be not taking the bait on that. I will actually. If you're saying I can't criticize them, I'll come up with something. Anyway, I do that, get the block. But then Keith Woods does the much more diplomatic sort of thing. He says, do you have this rule for comments about any other foreign ethnic or religious group? Completely logical, not criticizing Jews even. Or even hinting at it or anything like that, not accusing him of being a Zionist shill, none of that, right? It's just the most rational response possible, right? And he gets the block. And then your man goes off talking about him, impugning him, and the rest of it. So someone says they're very late, or I'm late, and thus they are up late. Well, if you want to watch it in the morning, watch away in the morning, or follow up in the car on the way to work or whatever. But same guy anyway, then blocks everybody basically, right? Again, someone explained to me how this makes sense, and not just this guy blocking and freaking out, but a lot of the other accounts that freak out. Why? Why not when I criticize Indians, right? Until someone can explain that, either that the theory has no truth to it, or it's fundamentally wrong and evil or bad or something, unlike any other criticism. Until those aspects, the truth of the argument and then the legitimacy of the argument, until those things can be disputed to me, then I don't know what to say. I'm not willing to back down just on sort of empty excoriation and shutting down of conversation alone. Like, that's not going to do it for me, so anyway, the guy goes on then to block everybody, and then he says, sort of not true, says, getting my account spammed, because Keith's a big account or whatever, so he kind of draws a lot of attention to it. Getting my account spammed from hundreds of accounts after Keith Wood supposedly outed me as a Jew. You can see the evidence there. Keith didn't do any such thing. Look, it's right here. He said, do you just asked a very simple question. And then when your man blocked him, Keith quote tweeted it and said, the guy blocked me for asking this question. That's all he said. But according to him, now we're into Antifa style stuff where you're kind of embellishing the truth a little bit, and set his Jew hating puppies on me. Again, this is Antifa language, no? Oh, this guy hates all immigrants. He hates all foreigners. When you're saying, no, I just don't want to bring 150,000 people in here, and I think it's destructive for the country overall. If you bring one random immigrant to me, I might think he's sound. I think immigrants, when they're in their own countries, thus not immigrants, are sound too. This is not, you're intentionally mischaracterizing the argument, and you're sort of creating this good versus evil drama to it. I don't get it. Set his Jew hating puppies on me. The same guy now would criticize immigrants and the rest of it. Grand. Keith Woods, who does fuck all for Ireland. So I think of the layering of scorn, right? Now Keith does fuck all for Ireland, right? Allegedly, obviously not true, right? But it's just pejorative language. It's just not in the spirit of a healthy conversation. Like, think of how polite Keith's question was, right? Reasonable, polite. Didn't say this guy's this, that, and the other. But now this guy's saying Keith Woods does fuck all for Ireland except talk about Jews. Keith talks about many things, right? I'm not here to white knight. It's the same as myself. I talk about many things. The free speech bill played a big role in that. Getting the censorship bill stopped played a huge role in that. Just lots of different things. Essays about like evolution, and also all sorts of stuff. Like, if anyone actually has a diverse catalog of like subject matter, it's probably him. And it's just that because it included or includes Jews or Zionists or whatever, now he does fuck all for Ireland except talk about Jews. No one would say to me, you do fuck all for Ireland except talk about Indians. I'd be like, what? You've got some agenda with Indians or what? Like, would that not be a reasonable question? I'm not saying, I don't know who this guy is, right? It's just an anonymous account. But just for anyone, would it not be a reasonable reaction, rational reaction, for someone to be like, what's your sort of dog in the fight with this like Indian thing? Like, weird, you've like gone like 360 just because of Indians who've touched a nerve. Well, like, what's the story there? I'm not the one making an exception for Jews. You are, so anyway, he does fuck all for Ireland except talk about Jews, National Socialism, and grift money. So a grifter, grifting money, low life, obsessed with one subject, does nothing for Ireland. So a traitor, a non-patriot. Like, think of how like sort of barbed that is compared to the original question, right? And for me, let's say, I'm not involved in this especially, but I just said free Palestine. That's my view. I say that there's a lot of influence. I don't go around pointing fingers at individuals or whatever. Even someone like John McGurk, I've often said he's got this, friend of Israel status, taken the trip to Israel, promotes Israel. I believe he like concertedly tries to advance the Israeli position. I don't think it makes sense. I think it's a bit strange, all the rest of it, right? People say he's a shill and all that. I kind of like a bit elude that, where I go, it doesn't sit right with me. But I'll say he's very intelligent, runs an excellent publication with Gript, makes great points, all of that kind of stuff. And I'm just a bit funny on the Israel thing, but I'd get over that. I wouldn't be like best friends or something, but like in terms of online about the ideas, I'll support him when he's right and all that. I disagree with him on the Israel thing. I'm a bit circumspect about the whole thing, but I wouldn't be having a meltdown about it, that kind of way. And so it's like, it's very strange. Anyway, he goes on. For clarity, Keith Woods didn't explicitly come out and call me a Jew directly. He does what he always does. He sends his attack dogs or something like that, right? Again, we return to he just said, ask the question. Same question I'm asking, but just more brief and to the point. So that was that. And I just want to delve more into it. And you might say, like, why are you focusing on this one anonymous account? First off, it's a prominent enough, like, anon account. And it's sort of representative of a general sentiment that by no means dominates the right-wing nationalist populism, but it's a significant thing there, and it's, according to my theory and reality, it's got a lot of backing and a lot of influence and can throw its weight around inordinately because it's got the outside backing and the rest of it. So this is just sort of representative of that. I'm just taking this as like a sort of a case study, right? But just to my point, I posted this morning just for a bit of crack, right? I took your man's original post and just substituted Albania for it, because the point is to just demonstrate how Strange it is. And I just said, anyone who posts something derogatory on my feed about Albanians is getting a block. I don't give a fuck who you are, how long we've interacted. I don't care if you troll or insult me in this tweet. I won't be replying. Go fuck yourself, sincerely, G. You know, it's a joke, but it's like, how off the wall would that be? Like, someone, like, obviously the first thing someone would ask is like, what's your deal with Albania? Like, you know, like, what's just like, and then if I said, you know, it's just because people here are obsessed with Albanians, because I heard yesterday someone post about how Albanians are known in Ireland to run a lot of criminal networks, trafficking, drug trafficking, all that, famous the world over with the old black Mercedes Benzes and the vibe and all that. Running drugs, human trafficking, and a lot of it is going through the asylum industry. And they, for many years, have been one of the highest applicants in the asylum industry, even though their country is deemed a safe country. And so it's like, and we don't necessarily want them here. Like, it's not the same as taking in a few Brits or a few Germans. Like this, a lot of the people coming here, not all Albanians, but a lot of them coming here, it is this systemic issue. You bring in a lot of these people through these migration channels, and there's a lot of crime and there's a lot of dodgy stuff. And I'm here to criticize it. I'm against it, and I'm critical of that group in general. Not all, but I am critical of this group as a en masse, right? If I had seen a few accounts post that and talk about that, someone made a video about it, whatever, and then I came on and I said, anyone who posts something derogatory, because I've seen a few things said, and anyone who posts anything else derogatory in my feed about Albanians is getting a block. I, as an ostensible right-wing nationalist, critic of outside groups and immigrants and all that stuff, like, would it not be completely, like, I feel like I'm going insane to even have to make the argument. Would it not be completely rational for someone to just say, what the fuck is going on there? Like, why? Like, and then if I said, I'm not talking about it, anyone who criticizes me for my hard pivot on Albanians specifically is a person who does fuck all for Ireland except talk about Albanians and grift money, and, you know, all of this. Like, it would be insane, right? So anyway, we go on. Here we have some of the responses. And again, I try not to, like, name names or go down that road or whatever, but I will. Like, I'm just going through these replies to take a little temperature read, right? And again, it's all fair. Like, I'm not coming in saying this person didn't pay his taxes 10 years ago. I heard from someone, or I heard they, you know, whatever. Like, it's not some personal thing, or you know, he's a terrible bastard, or you know, I'm not, in fact, the one doing that. I've no interest in that stuff. It's about the ideas. It's about the logic of the whole thing. So he goes, I'm having a major clear out, and I want these scumbags who do absolutely nothing to solve any issues in Ireland except talk about Jews out of my feed. Fuck them. And then you have Dr. Owen Linehan, right, who is whatever, right? He's his own, I don't know his whole bio, whatever, independent journalist, researcher, whatever, etc. But talks about right-wing sort of issues, is sort of like a nationalist right-wing. I don't know exactly how to describe, but like, generally speaking, I'd be broadly in line with him on, I would say, almost everything, right? Total fellow traveler. I mean, he might not feel the same way. I'm happy and safe to say that. And he's intelligent and he understands the issues quite well and all the rest of it. Spends a lot of time advocating on these immigration and the rest of it. And I haven't combed through his rhetoric, but would be fairly openly critical of immigration and some of the immigrant groups and some of the problems. I'm sure if you said to him, is it okay to be critical of Roma Gypsies? Are Roma Gypsies in Ireland just the same as everyone else? There's good and bad in every group, and there's nothing to see here. And it would be terrible for anyone to say otherwise. I imagine he would say, well, that's patently ridiculous. We're totally entitled with free speech and PC gone mad and all that, like, to speak plainly about these things. And we can have debates and disagree, be intelligent people. And someone might talk more about that group, less about that group, but it's like reasonable. It's part of discourse. Yeah, he's saying had to do a similar clear out of that lot before Christmas, just divisive trash. And again, we go back to the divisive thing, right? Because sometimes people disagree on a thing. Sometimes people make arguments that other people don't quite like. I'm not a huge fan of that argument or whatever, but I'd be open to the argument. I'd be open to discuss it. I won't clutch pearls. Well, that's vile anti-Semitic. That is dangerous. This kind of Antifa language, like, would be the very same. Like, Antifa would be on just as legitimate grounds to criticize a immigration skeptic as being a hater, dangerous extremist, or something like that. We all know that's sort of absurd, an absurd place to go in discussion in politics. So why on this? Just divisive trash. But I meant to pick up on the divisive thing. It's like, well, I don't think like, if you look at the language that, let's say, Keith used, or in my case, I said Free Palestine, and people started calling me all sorts of stuff, right? Certain people did. I mean, who was being divisive? They say you're being divisive because you brought up the Palestinian flag and you shouldn't have, and fuck you, and all this kind of stuff. It's like, I don't think I'm being the divisive, obsessed one here, to be honest. And you take this guy here and Keith, which one of them is being off the wall, obsessed? As Keith, I think Keith said basically something to the effect of like, which one of us truly is the one obsessed with Jews here, if we're being honest, right? Which is fair, and it's the same here. It's so this idea that, and it's such, I feel like it's such a gaslight. The idea that you bring up a topic, you want to discuss it a little bit, let the wine breathe, have a chat about it, go back and forth a bit. You have your view, you might want to stick with your view, and you're divisive trash for talking about it. I mean, it's like, it's just makes no. It's like, well, aren't you divisive trash for disagreeing with me? I'm great for a bad analogy, right? But when I was kind of going live, I was thinking, like, trying to think of an analogy for that idea, and it's like two people pick up like a large elastic band, and they're pulling at it, and they're pulling it further and further from each other. They both just found it on the street and picked it up at the same time, and they're pulling on it, and one person says to the other, "Stop pulling on this thing, you're going to break it." And both of them are, it's like, it's just sort of, that's a shite analogy, but I didn't spend long thinking about it. But it's like, who's being divisive? Is it me because I brought up the point, or did I bring it up by saying Free Palestine, or did someone else bring it up by criticizing Jews or Zionists, or at some point, or did this guy bring it up by posting his original post out of nowhere? Did he not get divisive to say that anyone who talks about Jews is a scumbag and a traitor and a this and a that and a jihadi or whatever? Is it not as legitimate to say, well, that person is clearly, with their intense rhetoric and really drawing lines, like making it not something that we can just discuss? Is that person not objectively being the divisive one? Surely, drawing a total line in the sand. Much like Owen himself, as I had to do a clear out of that lot, divisive trash. Aside from being profoundly Jew spelled with 3 O's, like, it's ridiculous to say Jew. Oh, it's the Jews or whatever. It's like, no, I'm not. Like, you can do the funny, scary sort of voice or whatever on Jew, but it's like, no, you can be. Can you not be legitimately critical of Jews, like the way you would be of Muslims or the Ummah or Islam or global Islam, or like, could you not? Would you say, oh, Muslims, oh, I just don't get that sort of. It's all hand wave. It's no substance. It's no, hey, let's defensive it. It's not true, and it's not legitimate for these reasons, and both of those are important: the legitimacy and the truth. Flesh out why. Besides just, it's divisive, it's evil, it's crazy. That's not an argument, right? Especially in the context of how you don't have that view about like other stuff. Anyway, so when people say whatever, right? I want to get in. I'll see who replied to Owen, because the reason I focus on him is because I think he's intelligent and generally fairly reasonable, and so I don't understand the pivot. The guy goes back and says, "Oh yeah, they're bad. I totally agree." So they're gassing each other up, and he says, "Nasty crowd." Again, look in the mirror, right? These people are divisive, trash. They're terrible. They're trade, whatever. Now, who's being nasty here? Like, right? And don't point to someone on who made a funny meme or, let's say, non-politically correct. Yeah, that's on the internet. That's the way it works all across the board, right? I'm talking about real people making a real argument, take your Keith, take your me, take whoever else on this matter. He says, nasty crowd, block and move on is the only answer. You'll notice they spend all their time ranting about supposed, again, Jews with 3 O's on the right, but never actually go after the left or establishment. Useless cult. Now, I'm not saying he's referring to me, but I'll put myself in that proxy position. Or take your Keith or whoever. Never go after the left or establishment. I mean, I'm just thinking myself, Keith. I'm trying to think of who else. There aren't many people in Ireland. There's loads of Anons and lots of people internationally, but a lot of people want to stay away from it in Ireland because it's a thistle, right? And because there actually is so much influence in Ireland in all the strategic nodes and choke points. So it's like a lot of people come to me and message me, real people, not just Anons or whatever, and say, yeah, I know. I've gotten calls. I've had people calling me, concern trolling me to stop talking, criticizing Jews, giving me various excuses for why I shouldn't do it and this and that. And I could go on and on. For the sake of discretion, I won't. It's like, there's a lot of people know, more people than you would think know, even prominent people and all that totally know, but they're like staying quiet on it for the very reasons of my theory, right? Because if it wasn't some problem, then why wouldn't they just say it? Because they'll talk about, oh, the Clan Scheme Mosque and the Muslims are scheming away and this, that, and the other. But then they're like, oh, I don't want to talk, like, I don't want to say, right? Looking over the shoulder kind of thing. Well, that's to my point. Why? I'm not singling out the Jews, as Owen says, exclusively. Far from it, right? I've talked about everything. So I'm not the one being exceptional about this issue, right? Necessarily. But they never go after the left or establishment. Again, a useless cult, he says, right? Okay, so not divisive language at all, right? Go after, sure, take Keith or whoever else. There's loads of going after. It's just patently nonsense. It's like the establishment, the regime, the left. I've gone after Sinn Féin loads of times. Well, whatever you want to call the left, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, I consider them left regime. And Paul Murphy, and I've spent years talking about everything, and it's often included the Jewish Zionist thing probably in an inordinately measured and reserved sense, because I know it's a thorny problem on the right for the reasons I outline. And only recently have I just sort of gloves off a bit, sort of opened up a bit on it a bit more. So this might be referring to some hypothetical figment or other person, but it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. I'll leave it at that, right? And I'm all happy for someone to this idea that it's divisive. I mean, I know I'm just repeating myself, but it's like, what can you do when that's the approach you get? That's the stonewalling you get, right? And the attacks you get. Think of the language that's being used here. What do you do with that? Do you just say, okay? Do you take the gaslighting? Do you say, well, okay, it clearly has created a lot of division? Do you say, well, me standing on business on this issue ends with a lot of division, therefore I must walk away from it? Or do you actually look at it like I am, analytically, and say, I don't think I'm creating division. I don't think I'm drawing up firewalls. I don't think I'm burning bridges. I don't think I'm attacking people and calling them Jewish shills or any of this kind of stuff. I don't think I'm doing that. I think I've, from the word go, which was just Free Palestine flag, my view, if you don't like it, if it's such not a big deal, if it's such a foreign issue, nothing to do with us and who cares, then you won't really mind. But that's not how it is. If I say, oh, well, I'm critical of Jewish Zionist influence on the right, I think it's a bit of an issue, like I can demonstrate. I'm not imagining it here. I can point to the sort of like fairly strong evidence on this stuff. So I'm just bringing that up sort of politely. And it's the shutdown mob is creating the drama on it and the personal enmity. So do I just say, whoa, that's too hot to handle from some of these people, I'll just shut up about it? Or is that more of a reason to press on and just say, just insist on the logic of it? Wait a second. No one's explaining to me why I can't talk about this. You can't say, well, that's all you talk about. You never talk about anything else. So no, it's not true. So we have to just be like, we have to be honest, right? We have to be honorable, don't we? We have to stick to principles and we have to be fair to the other side. I don't think anything I'm saying here, analyzing what Owen is saying, this Peter Paul guy is saying, or, you know, if I say I'm critical of John McGurk because like he seems to end up in these high positions, sort of pro-life and this and the other, float from one to the other, and always sort of be pressing on the back burner the Israel agenda pretty strongly. I don't say, well, he went into a smoky room and took a big bag of silver. I don't say that because I don't know that. I don't strictly believe something as kind of cartoonish as that. I'm just saying what is. Do I think he's a bad guy? Do I think he's malevolent? I don't know him. I'm not a mind reader. I'm just saying what, like, I'm giving a fair characterization of him from a certain perspective as a political entity. And the same here with how I'm talking about Owen Linehan and Peter Paul. I'm taking it at face value and sort of no more than that. And I'm giving my reason why I disagree. So someone just needs to tell me why we can't talk about it. And it's to my point. It's like, clearly with any issue, if I were right, this is exactly, if someone said there's no issue with the Jews, there's no issue with Zionist influence on the right and all this stuff, you're crazy. Well, if I was crazy, no one would care. Someone would say, yeah, you're right, actually. There are things to be critical of them on, actually. And it's legitimate to talk about it here and there. You know, we're not measuring how much you talked about one thing versus another. If you want to talk about Indians one day and you want to talk about this the other day and criticize the government the other day and criticize Paul Murphy another day, like, I won't blow up at you for talking about Paul Murphy, nor will I blow up with you for being critical about Jewish people or Zionists or any of that stuff. All's fair. If that were the case, if I were so wrong, then there wouldn't be this big backlash. There wouldn't be this bizarre silencing sort of effect going on. And what's the word? Ostracization, maybe? Like, you know, where they become immediately, you're part of, to quote like Owen's words here, useless cult. This is within one tweet. Useless cult, nasty crowd, block and move on. They spend, you know, like just a bit before that, just to take him as the example, divisive trash. So we have, okay, divisive trash, Jew-addled, dishonest and craven, cancer, nasty crowd, useless cult. That's within 2 tweets. That's the wording. So who's being divisive? Who is being het up on this, right? And who is being unfair? I think, you know, I rest my case. Yeah, anyway, I was going to talk about Dennis O'Brien, work from home, and gone beans and capitalism and almost the need for a sort of a new deal economically. Like, the world has changed and we're still working on 2015 wages, and how technological advancements have led to productivity surpluses and stuff, and we're still operating on the same model that we did in like 1960, effectively. 5-day week, wages sort of are actually buy you less than they used to, yet we have the internet and all this stuff. I have the whole spiel on that, and the mentality of the Gombeen, the mentality of the asset owner, the business owner, all of it. I have this whole thing I want to get into, but it's too late tonight. I definitely would be off the wall to just sort of attach that to my previous ramble. So I'll do that another night and whatever. But anyway, that's basically it for me. Yeah, shall I leave it there? Was there anything else on it? Let me think. Because I see, I don't want to come on with another stream about it. Now, the thing is, there might be third, fourth order effects from this whole discussion. I might have to talk about it more. At which point, of course, oh, the Jew addled, the obsessed, you talk about nothing else. You never talk about immigrants. You never criticize the government. Not true at all. Obviously not true. Let's take a 10-year view here. Let's take a 2-month zoom out. Like, don't just catch me in the middle of the active debate we're having, where you're being just as passionate and fiery, far more than I am on it, and head up about it. And you're the one provoking the disagreement, more so, really, in a sense, as opposed to just, passing it by or letting it go. You're at least equally responsible for the division and the clash here. But it's so funny. You can't catch someone in the middle of an act, because sometimes the debate goes on for a couple of weeks or whatever, there's a discourse going on. You can't catch someone in the middle of a discourse and then say, you're obsessed. You're talking about nothing else. Look, you've talked about it yesterday. You talked about it today. It's like, well, yeah, I'm talking about it now because we're talking about it. That's the issue. But like, you can't say, you talk about nothing else. You never attack or criticize the government it's like, well, yeah, I'm not doing it now because we're in the middle of a debate about the subject matter that we're currently talking about. Like, so obviously I'm not criticizing the government while I'm debating it with you, It's just, it's nuts. It's nuts. It doesn't make any sense. There's only one way in which all of this makes sense. And it's a sort of influence. And by influence, again, so you could say, oh, are you calling Owen Linehan, Shill, Page, this? I'm actually not at all. I don't know what anyone is doing behind the scenes. I don't know what their thought process is, what their motivations are, their vested interests and all that. It's a losing game to try and do that with people. But like I've said, influence works in many ways. People could be totally sincere in their beliefs, but they are subject to an influence. And my argument would be that that influence doesn't make sense. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't fit in the nationalist scene. It's not right. So I don't know how he got there with that mentality, but either way, I would say, well, yeah, it's obviously downstream from that influence being so strong on the right. How else did people suddenly become uber sensitive about one group? And, I don't, anyway. But again, it's like, don't cast aspersions, Oh, my point was just that influence, works in many different ways. It can lead to a situation where sincere actors are pressing on a view, but that whole narrative has been created out of sustained long-term influence operations. You could go back decades, you know what I mean? For how we got to this point. Like, if it were the case that none of us on the right could, we were all going to be in trouble if we talk about Burmese Buddhist nationalists. It might be the case that someone who's hyped up criticizing me for talking about the Buddhist Burmese, it might be the case that they're not paid by the Burmese, but the Burmese have actually been active within narrative formation and political structures in my world for decades. And so lots of people just sort of sincerely believe that we must never criticize the Burmese, the Burmese can do no wrong, etc. So again, it's not, you don't have to be casting aspersions on someone taking a check or, any of that kind of stuff. Although some people, of course, do. So anyway, yeah, I'll, yeah, I'm trying to find any other, because if it doesn't go any further than this or sort of dies off, it's like, I'm not, I do want to actually talk about other stuff, but I'm just checking my notes, because if I can park it there for a while, that'd be great. Oh yeah, so when people talk about oh, that's anti-Semitic, so they're grand with criticism of other groups and the rest of it, but suddenly they go, you can't say that about them, you can't be anti-Semitic, you can't be anti-Zionist, whatever, because that's not acceptable, that's bad, that's evil, or something, like the moralizing, and argument-free sort of moralizing about criticizing a group. My point of view is the only group that I'll get head up about, so let's say this Peter Paul guy, or whatever his name is losing his marbles at Keith for asking him a totally ordinary question. My question would be sort of like, or my position with that would be, the only way I would lose my marbles at with Keith like that, and I never would, right? Because I wouldn't speak so bizarrely about anyone, like sound unhinged about them. But if I were to get like, say, whoa, 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 you can't talk like that, you can't say that, I will not tolerate that group being spoken about in such terms, being dissected, analyzed, deconstructed, criticized, and the rest of it, potentially made into an enemy figure where people won't like them, and that's not nice, where your rhetoric leads to personal dislike of an individual within a group, all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. The only way I would get like that about any group on earth, really, is if it was hibernophobia. If Keith or whoever, some English person or whatever, anyone, an American or whatever, came out just saying Irish this, Irish that, they're dumb, they're leftist, they're colonial slave morality, I don't know, something, whatever, potato munchers, just some sort of thing like that. And even then I'd just be like, that's dumb, you know, it's whatever. But like some criticism, or like, I hope Ireland fails, I hope Ireland does bad, I hope Ireland get treated badly in some way, and I don't like Irish people and fuck Irish people and all that, then I will get my hackles up, because it's like, well, yeah, that's like, if you're going to criticize an identity group, if I'm open to it across the board generally, but I make one exception, well, yeah, it's for Irish people because I'm Irish, right? Same way I don't mind Israelis being, or Jews being hypersensitive and sort of neurotic about people criticizing them, even when the criticism is fair, that they sort of lump it in, sort of, they like, you know, tell a lie a bit and kind of go, oh, that's terrible, that's evil, you can't say that, how dare you criticize us, you're going to lead to us getting hurt or harmed or disliked or discriminated or whatever, you know, trying to basically hush you up with moralizing and cancel culture and all this stuff. I kind of go, well, yeah, that's fair. Like, I mean, you're Jewish, you're Israeli, and that's how the world works. I would be the same if someone criticizes Irish people. A black person would be the same for black people and all that. And then equally, if someone is universally against criticism of any group because they're a postmodern Marxist liberal or whatever, then that's consistent. But when people have this sort of like unique hysterical exceptionalism for one group being criticized, I don't think a lot of these people would be as hysterical, and hysterical is the word, if there was criticism of Irish. It would be like, you just go back and forth and go, let's debate it, how, you know, you shouldn't say that, and la 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 la. But for it to be hysterical, where I need to purge and prune all these people out and they're trash, and, you know, I went through all the pejoratives there, many of them. You know, if there's one group who you see just go off the wall because they're criticized, that doesn't make sense to me. For me, it's like, I know I'll get like that for Irish people, and for everyone else, to varying degrees, I suppose. But like, for the most part, it's fair game across the board for everyone else. I won't condemn any group as all evil and all bad, and, you know, be mean to groups. I wouldn't say that for anyone. But I would also say you can speak plainly, you can be bombastic a bit, you can be not politically correct about any group equally. Fair across the board. So my point is, like, the only thing I get, oh, that's anti-Semitism, oh, that's racism. The only thing I get that, oh, you can't. The only way I get that reaction is if it's hibernophobia. That's the one that I lose sleep over at night, right? That's the one that I freak out about, is hibernophobia, anti-Irish. That's all. The others is the concern for someone else. They can defend themselves and make their argument and cancel everyone, or, you know, fight the good fight for themselves and be self-identifying. And the only group that I'm like that for is Irish people, you know. Just like in Israel, they don't have a dozen different human rights organizations funded by the Irish state to teach their 6-year-olds about the potato famine, and how, because of Benjamin Disraeli or whoever, I don't even know the history. I'm kind of making that, I don't know it. But like somehow, I'm sure you could come up with a theory. Somehow, through extension, the Jewish population had some role tangentially to the potato famine through the British Empire or whatever. And insofar as we do have some connection and responsibility for it, we ought to feel quite bad about it. And we ought to be very careful to never, ever, ever let a whisper of hibernophobia exist in these classrooms, in this society, in the workplace, in any institution, even in private life, on social media. We will stamp it out. We'll come up with laws and the rest of it, and we will guilt trip and indoctrinate and traumatize our 7-year-olds by showing them dead bodies, emaciated bodies for the potato famine, and tell them that, you know, fundamentally, as a sort of a blood libel, you're kind of responsible for it. So you better, you know, think about that, feel bad about it, and we won't tolerate that discourse. And even sometimes hibernophobia, you might try to frame it as legitimate criticism, but let's come up with like IHRA definition of hibernophobia, where all sorts of convoluted ways that you legitimately kind of criticize Ireland can still be constituted as vile hibernophobia that must not be tolerated and could lead to another potato famine and all this. It's absurd to think that Israel would do that, right? And to be honest, it would be insane. I think they were mad to do that, right? Just like it is for us. Why would I be? I'm not saying, oh yeah, go out and hate Jewish people, go out and hate all Zionists or Israelis. I'm not a ridiculous person, but I'm not promoting saying anti-Semitism is great, or I don't care about people being unfairly disliked or whatever. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying in terms of anti-Semitism looming large as a big, scary, the worst thing in the world. My point is that just like Israelis with hibernophobia, it's sort of back there for me, you know. I don't really sort of obey that. I don't pledge allegiance to that idea. Same way Israelis and Jews don't pledge allegiance to the highest order principle that one must never be hibernophobic, and it's a shocking crime and sin for that to happen, and that should be top in their consciousness. That wouldn't make sense at all, right? So I'm concerned about hibernophobia, and anti-Semitism, whatever that means, is sort of obscure and unrelated to me. For me, I'll just criticize all groups and whatever, and I don't see it as anti-Semitism or racism or any of this. Same way an Israeli would say, well, I'm not going to criticize Ireland and second guess, and we're all going to castigate each other on whether or not it's hibernophobia. It's just not. That's for Irish people to be worrying about. Does that make sense, right? And I think I've caveated that I'm not advocating for hatred of people or whatever, but it's just like, it's bizarre. And especially, I know I'm harping at this point, but especially within the right-wing nationalist populist scene, where that's the whole game. That is the whole game, that, hey, it's legitimate for us to criticize groups. It's legitimate for us to be a bit anti-PC. That's all fine. So why the exceptionalism? Why are you so obsessed, right? Anyway, yeah, I'll leave it there. One super chat. Peter O'Loughlin. Let's see what the chat is. You're fond of the block button on X yourself, Garrod. Hypocrite. Oh, this is fun. If Israel ceases to exist, where will the Jews live? You want them to live in the West. This is fun. Okay. I enjoy this, actually, because, I mean, I'll take super chats are grand. Say whatever you want, but I like a challenge. So what was he telling me recently, or you, Peter, telling me on? You gave me some other lecture on a previous stream. It was like, you should talk about this or that instead, or whatever. I can't remember. Sorry, but I'm fond of the block button on X myself. Everyone blocks, right? I like Here was one that came up recently for me. I said something about healthcare or something about government policy, and I said, or the state of GPs in Ireland these days accessing care or whatever. And I was saying, I can't get access. I need medication for a pain, for an injury, an issue I have, and I can't get it, or something like that. But it was related to like how the health system works. I was just illustrating a point. I wasn't bleeding about my personal life, but it illustrated the point. and someone said, "Oh, like you're clearly addicted and popping pills or something like that." And in my mind, this is someone on, right? And I'm sitting there going, "Well, no, it's a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. It's like a basically glorified ibuprofen. They are not addictive." And I know that this is like not relevant really, but I'm going, they're not addictive under anyone's definition. They're not healthy either. It's better not to take them. Better to be organic and pharmacy free and all that. But you don't know the issue I have, and I'm aware of the stakes and the different things going on. That's obviously a personal thing. I'm an intelligent person, and I know that thing I'm referring to is not addictive, as a matter of fact. And you're thinking of opiates and or something like that, and you don't know me, and you're anonymous, and you're saying I'm popping pills and I'm an addict and I'm doing this and that. And I tried to say, well, no, the thing I'm taking is not that. And they went, well, it sounds like it is. Well, they all are. And I said, no, I don't want to tell you exactly. I don't need to tell you exactly everything. I'm just saying, no, I'm not a pill addict, right? And you're just intentionally being obnoxious and sort of putting on paper, basically online. You're telling people that I'm taking something that you've no idea about, and you're sort of dismissing my own testimony as like not true, even though you clearly have no idea about what I'm talking about, what I'm doing, what my life. So that's just completely obnoxious, intentionally obnoxious, nuts, right? So I go, I am blocking that account. I never want to hear from that person again. That's incredibly annoying. Stuff like that. Some Antifa comes into my account and says, you better watch your back, or, TikTok, Gerald, or, anything like that, where the person does not want, is either being totally weird and obnoxious. It's not a political thing, just totally weird and obnoxious, or where the person is not engaging my argument at all. And they're just saying, you're this, you're that, you better watch out, you're a scumbag. Look, you're an incel, you're on the dole, things that they're just making up, right? I go, well, obviously I don't want to engage with this person, like, just fuck off. So I press the block button, right? So, and again, this is actually an example of this. You're fairly fond of the block button on X yourself, Garrod. I mean, hypocrite, right? Again, what's the hypocrisy? This is just bullshit. I'll actually probably block you next, to be honest. Because, like, again, who did I block? What did I block someone for? Like, bring the person I blocked and tell me what it was for, or I'll find out myself. And it's going to be legitimate. It's fair. I have political agreements with people all the time. And that's the issue. It's not that, I don't come at people with personal stuff or obnoxious sort of sideways things or whatever. It's always about politics. That's what Twitter or online stuff is. I'm talking about politics here. So that's it. I don't think I've ever blocked someone for a legitimate, ordinary political argument where the person disagrees with me and we strongly disagree and it's about the ideas or whatever, and it's like, it's in some way reasonable at all. I don't think I don't block people. Oh, I'm hiding that because I disagree and I don't want their view to get out or to be seen or to have a fair shake or whatever. I don't do that. So it's bullshit, basically. Hypocrite. Anyway, if Israel ceases to exist, where will the Jews live? Again, what did I say about Israel ceasing to exist? Find me the sentence where I said Israel should cease to exist, right? Now, that's a complex issue. You could define what that means. Define Israel ceasing to exist. Like, take George Galloway, for example, a leftist. He said, oh, I think it should be basically a one-state solution. And it should be taken under international administration with, probably UN troops there or whatever to keep the peace. Some people might argue that'd be a total shit show, whatever, maybe. But like, that's one argument, the one-state solution. And come up with a representative governance system, and maybe where there's, peace walls, like in the north of Ireland or whatever. But like a one-state solution, just like the West has, we're told, oh, well, we have to live with diversity, and don't be worried about getting replaced. We're all the same. Well, maybe that should go for Israel too, if that's the case. Rather than penning people into a fucking prison strip or whatever. and let the chips fall where they may. Have the international community watch over it and give everybody there, regardless of religion or ethnicity, equal rights, and have a democracy, because that's apparently what's good for us, right? When we say, oh, but we'll be put in danger in the future, well, we aren't necessarily listened to, right? So, and his idea was to call it the Holy Land. I thought that had a good ring to it. But you know, Jewish Zionist Israeli will tell you that, well, that's tantamount to driving the Jews into the sea, ceasing to exist. They'll have to become a diaspora. They'll be persecuting it, and yeah, whatever again. Maybe, maybe not. You know, I don't know. That's their point of view. That's their argument. That's their chauvinistic argument. But on the other hand, that's exactly what they're doing to the Palestinians. They're openly talking about and are ethnically cleansing them in the most dystopian, unvarnished fashion. I mean, rubble, dead kids, driving people from one refugee camp to the other and bombing it, starving them out, the whole lot. Like, it's like a cartoon of what ethnic cleansing would look like. The most gaudy, destructive, dystopian, violent example, cruel example of what you could possibly imagine, right? And they're doing that. So it's like, well, like, you know, oh, the Jews will be driven out and killed and slaughtered, and it's, well, that's what you're doing to the Palestinians right now. So it's just like, I don't know. Also, like, the whole idea of a Holy Land, like one state solution. Again, I don't, that's all, you know, I find that interesting. You could debate these things. You could have a Jewish person there and they give their argument, and you could say, listen, it's fair for us to say that you're clearly have a dog in the fight, right? You could have a Muslim Palestinian there say, you also have a dog in the fight, but I'll take your arguments. And let's have a few people who don't have a dog in the fight from the West or whatever, and we'll have a discussion and bring in all the issues. But it's not everything that isn't Greater Israel equals Israel ceasing to exist. They all get genocided by the Palestinians or whatever. That's like, that narrative is a little bit bullshitty as well. So I don't agree with your premise either. And I never said I want Israel to cease to exist. I never even mentioned and went anywhere near the actual internal politics of like Israel Palestine per se anyway, did I? I mean, I appeal to you, the audience. Did I? If you watched me tonight and last night, when did I like suggest that? So anyway, so where will the Jews live? And so for something I never suggested or opined on, I now have to come up with a solution for where the Jews will live under a hypothetical that I didn't even go anywhere near, discuss, never mind answer. So now I need to figure out where the Jews will live. I just obviously reject the question. It just doesn't make sense. You want, and then follow, you want them to live in the West. I want Israelis to. So he's saying I want Israel to be wiped off the face of the, wiped off the map. Israelis all to be driven out onto like a, you know, like barges or whatever, just driven out by land or whatever. So whatever, how many of it? It's 8 million, 6 million, 5 million, whatever. Several million Jews to be driven out systematically in one big pile of people, and then need somewhere to live, and then they all come and settle in Ireland or the West. It's just, no, it doesn't make sense. I probably would be, I suppose I'd be for them. I probably, if you put a gun to my head and said you have to opine on it now, I haven't thought too deeply on it, but I suppose a one-state solution, yeah, probably makes sense. Maybe they can move to Florida. I don't know. I don't know. A one-state solution seems logical to me, given that it's a question of them genociding and driving out the Palestinians in reality, or a hypothetical of maybe the Palestinians would do that to them. But I think probably a internationally managed one-state solution might make sense. But then you have the question of Iran and geopolitical, like World War III, basically. It's so much to it. Like, I don't know. I never kind of deigned to get into it. But I'm also a hypocrite, and I block mysterious unnamed people on X. Just fuck off, basically, I would say. Sorry, bud. Appreciate the question, but it wasn't in good faith. And there you go. So, Armchair Limerick Nationalist, friend of the channel, thank you very much. 5 again. Oh, by the way, Peter, thanks for the 5. I appreciate it. And thanks, Armchair Limerick Nationalist, for the 5 as well. So yeah, that's it. I'll leave it there. I'll talk to you again soon. We will get back to. I'll stop obsessing and spending all my entire life obsessing because I'm crazy and a lunatic and evil talking about this issue or whatever. I'll have to stop because the boss said so. Word has come down from the top that we're not allowed to talk about this, so I better stop talking about it. I'm joking, but yeah. Anyway, I'll be back again soon. We'll talk about some other stuff. For now, good night. Take care of yourselves. See ya. Ihawan.